The tour is now on sale. My spring tour in 2018 of Like I Mean It, which was the show I took to the Edinburgh Festival this year, 2017, and which was one of the 20 best reviewed shows of that festival, which I'm very excited about. And I should already qualify that by saying best reviewed comedy shows. I don't know how it fared against the theatrical and ballet and Swedish clowning giants there. But the show itself, Like I Mean It, is coming to a town near you if you live in the United Kingdom and Ireland. If you don't live in those places, if you're in Melbourne, with a bit of luck, it's coming to you next year as well. And if you live anywhere else, make me an offer. But go to comedianscomedian.com/tour to find out where you can come and see in the UK and Ireland my lovely show. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Best one ever again. Now on with the show.
This is a podcast from comedianscomedian.com.
This is the Comedian's Comedian podcast. So my name's Stuart Goldsmith. Welcome to the show. Now, it's been pointed out to me that I very rarely at the beginning of this show tell you what the show is about, assuming that you've all been on board since day one. Now, if you're new to this podcast, basically I'm going to talk to one comedian, in this case, Mr. Reginald D. Hunter, one of the most prolific comedians I've spoken to, certainly someone who has been performing year after year after year for way before since I became a comic myself. And I'm going to be talking to Reg about his creative process. And these days as well, over the life of my podcast, it's become fractionally less about how do you write your jokes and more about how do you cope? How do you cope with being you? So this, I think, if this is your first foray into the podcast, it's as good a starting point as any. There's some pretty heavy stuff coming up, and I'm going to just alert you to a couple of things. I don't think you... Okay, so have we spoken on this show before about trigger warnings? I think what a trigger warning is, when the phrase is used correctly, is when you announce that something incongruously upsetting is going to happen. And I think a podcast where people talk about their lives, almost nothing is incongruous. So whilst I think a trigger warning is sensible if you're an episode of Sesame Street and you're going to cover sexual assault, which is, reasonable, I don't say that lightly, but that's an appropriate place for a trigger warning. I suppose this is a conversation about a man's life, and he's a controversial man, so I think I'd just like you to be prepared in advance for some of the stuff we're going to talk about. I say heavy, I don't want to worry anybody. We get pretty deep pretty quickly, and Reg is admirably candid about what he's been going through, particularly for the last 3 years, and the reasons behind it. And I thank Reg for opening up so much. I also press him a little later in the interview on some of the things he's said in the past. Now, this isn't Frost Nixon, and I never want to ambush anybody or kind of have pretensions towards ambushing comics and sort of confronting them. At the same time, I do think part of what makes this podcast interesting and exciting for me, and hopefully for you, is that I do like to, or I feel some, not a responsibility, that's the sort of thing a wanker would say, but I do, I like to challenge people on their preconceptions of themselves. And I think later on in this show, towards the end, we talk about some of those things that you may remember if you're a completist. Michelle Acorte, fabulous New Zealand comic, and I talked about when we saw Reg live in New Zealand several years ago. We talk about this show, Reg and I, and also his minder. I don't know quite what to call Cash, he has many jobs. Cash weighs in on some of those subjects as well. So let's see what you make of this. I'm very proud of this, and I'm very grateful to Reg for participating. I think you're going to enjoy it. This is Reginald D. Hunter. This is a particular set of circumstances, Reg, because it's the last day of the Edinburgh Festival, and it's an insane time to do a podcast with someone. And by the time we arranged and rearranged the dates, I should have thought, let's do this at another time.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think this is the best time for you to do it, because it's like, I did 7 weeks of touring between April and May, and then we had the Edinburgh Festival, which is ending today, and tonight I'll be doing the 7th gig in 3 days, and it's like, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of pretense to me at this point. I'm if I wanted to say something fake, it's gonna come out all fucked up and honest. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so you lucked out.
Okay, well, thank you. How is it performing on stage when you're in a wheelchair? Do you find it limiting, or does it free up the words?
I tell you what, man, real talk, I really think the broken leg has been like a blessing from the universe in many different ways. In a non-performance sense, it sort of made you sort of, while you in life, kind of be a spectator at the same time. People around you, talking around you. And it's like people you even know, you get to see them for real. Because in some ways you become not quite a person. You know, everybody still like you and dig you and everything, but you know, you see people around you talking about you like you're not there, like, well, what are we gonna do about this? Well, how are we gonna get him in the thing? And just, you know what, he don't like that. And, you know, you're just sitting right there, you know, and so performance-wise though, it's been a real blessing. First of all, when I came back, my first gig after breaking my leg, I think the combination of the leg and having to scramble around with it, and maybe even the opiates, it just made you slow down and take your time. And I had forgotten one of my rules that when I first started in comedy, well, John Gordillo helped me learn this, because John Gordillo is the person who really helped me the most hands-on. He taught me to slow down and enjoy the words that you wrote. You wrote these. You tell the jokes that you enjoy saying and enjoy them. And not just the punchlines either, the premises, the setup. Enjoy the articles in your sentences. Just, you know, the these and the those and the theys and just all of that. And so, yeah, the wheelchairs made me slow down. And I half jokingly often say that I am a comedian, but I actually aspire to raconteur class. And sitting in the wheelchair, it feels like a glimpse of what being a raconteur might be like.
Yes.
And yeah, I feel I'm a good 5 to 8 years away from achieving raconteur class if I keep working at this pace.
And what is that? Because I think there's an element of your show, the story about Harper Lee. Would you say that kind of fits into raconteur class?
I guess it would. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't put that together yet. But yeah, it's Harper Lee is partly, I guess, raconteur, but it's also, I just reached a stage in my career now where it's just, I'm tired of not saying shit because I ain't found a punchline for it yet.
Yeah.
Because a lot of stuff I write is pretty good. It's just no punchline to it. And oftentimes I found that you've done all the writing you can off stage. Sometimes the last bit you need, you can only find on stage. So I've been hoping that there's going to be a night where I throw in this ad-lib that's just going to be hilarious, and you go, that's the punchline.
Yeah, gotcha. For the Harper Lee bit, which at the moment you are prefacing by saying, this bit isn't funny. It isn't funny. This bit may not be funny, and you just tell a story to talk about an idea.
Yeah, and it was just such a good idea, and it's like, and I see why some comedians quit. And they go on to write books or plays or stuff like that. It's just, well, I've been a stand-up since, 97? So I'm in, 98. So 19 years of being a stand-up. I get the feeling sometimes I get tired of trying to get all my best ideas, and I can only say them to people if I can make them stupid. It's like, it's just, but yeah, it's also wanting to change. I want to change. I don't want to say I want to change the form, but it's like when I first started loving stand-up was when I was a kid, and I would be listening and watching Richard Pryor, and there'd be sometimes he'd be doing a joke, and I would really be into it, and then he would stop, and I'd go, no, more, no. And years later, in his box set that he released, there was an interview with him, and a journalist or a chronicler, much like yourself, asked him, what bugs him about his own work. And he says, when I lose my nerve and I pull out too soon, I'm not getting enough quick laughs, and I don't hang in there, and I don't stay with the subject. That's what makes me mad with myself. And I was like, yes, that's what made me mad with you too.
Well, I can't not now ask you what makes you mad with you. Is that the same thing? Is that the first thing you come to? Because that's a great question. What bugs you about yourself?
Myself, or my work, or just myself in general?
Let's do yourself in general first, and then we'll do your work.
Oh man, come on now.
You offered.
Yeah. Well, the things that make me mad about myself is just too myriad to name, and just and since I ain't been out of bed long, and I just met you, I'm not comfortable exposing myself that much yet. Give me about 20 minutes.
Let's start with work then.
What makes you mad about my work? I do this. There's a certain sound that my jokes have. I think of myself as a tone comedian. A lot of my punchlines really depend on tone. And if you don't use the right tone, then you're just saying something really shitty. And I get mad. I get frustrated with myself. Like I'll write a joke sometimes, and I look at the punchline, and I'll go, yeah, but that's exactly what I would say. That is the kind of thing I would think.
Okay.
And sometimes when I'm performing in front of an audience, it's like, and they're laughing, and it's like, you really don't see where this is going. You don't really see this. This is not obvious to you. No wonder I can't grow.
What an incredible articulation of that viewpoint of your own work. I've never had. This is episode 220 something, and I've never had another comic say that before. That's fascinating to hear that you like. It's almost like you're thinking, how can you not be anticipating where this is going?
Yeah.
Because you know your stuff so well, and they know your stuff well. They know you have a following, you have a big audience, you're playing a huge room up here, and I've experienced that watching Tom Binns do Ivan Brackenbury. You know, I mean, it's a fantastic act. I've had Tom on the show, we've talked about it. But I as a comic, am watching there going, you know, the song is going to turn out to be about, it's going to complete the sentence. And he's ripping gigs. I've, seen him at Glastonbury tear the roof off that tent. And you're thinking, how are you guys not getting this? Now, I suppose that's a kind of route one example of it, because the nature of those types of punchlines of that kind of character are very set up punch. You're far more complex, I think, in your delivery, and so I just want to talk about that. Like, you feel they should be able to see the tone coming.
It's not that they should see the tone coming. It's just they should see the idea coming, I think, or the punch or whatever. It's like, because I think my stuff is laden with minor callbacks. I mean, the clues in the premise, the clues in the setup. I mean, that's the point of a premise and a setup. Is you're giving the audience the information they need in order to laugh at the thing. And it's like, even like giving you the thing you still don't know. Yeah, okay, all right. And what's this other thing I get mad with sometimes? I get mad with, not mad, but I just get mad is not harsh enough. I think it's lightly disgusted. I get lightly disgusted with myself when I think there's too much exposition in my work sometimes. And sometimes I just think, well, just get to the fucking joke. Because there's the joke that needs to be said, and there's all the other stuff in it that you just simply like saying.
Yeah. Okay.
But the audience needs. And the exposition is fine when you're doing like an Edinburgh show or a tour show. The more literate audiences in Britain, they can great forming of an idea, just interesting contrast. There are moments, and this is one of the things I enjoy, is when I'm doing the exposition right, you can hear members of the audience at the same time go, like a collective, you hear it.
Okay.
Like, oh, that's not a bad idea.
Okay. So those two ideas seem to me to have a conflict with each other. That, like you were saying, the stuff that Gordillo had said, that John had said about slowing down and enjoying the words, every word, and at the same time you're frustrated with yourself sometimes that you are kind of enjoying the language too much.
I'm just being verbose. I come from verbose people. My father is verbose. He loves it. It's essentially. it comes from the belief that you really, really want to be understood, and you try over hard to make sure the person understands. And it's like you just have to go relax, Rich. They got it. They understand the setup. But also too, I think I've fallen into a trap over here in that so many people comment on the tonal quality of my voice. And it's, now I don't hear people say all kind of sideways compliments like, oh, I could just listen to him read the phone book. He doesn't have to do jokes, or oh, it's just, I don't really care about the jokes. I just love hearing him talk. And it's like, and that's another thing that can be tough for me is when I'm a certain kind of tired, there's a tonal quality that dips and gets to a certain level, and it genuinely lulls people to like just blah, and they enjoy blah. It's just that none of the jokes go in.
Yes.
And so I become more of a lecturer than a comedian.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons why I'm conscious about when I'm speaking on stage to change speeds. Just high, low, zigzag, somber, silly. I try to change speed so I don't lull them into a state of blah.
Yeah, okay, because your rhythm and just the sound of your voice is just, the danger is it's soporific for them. Yeah,
and and you gotta tell when I'm doing it, because there's always somebody in the audience that just has drunk people can't handle it. Drunk people pass the fuck out when I do that. And they just, and then, they get up and they be mad. That thing was very funny. And, it's, and when I tell you, when I went to New York, I did 17 gigs in 10 days there. And, the story, what they talk about, the New York Minute.
Yeah.
Is like, that was the first time I didn't need all the words. It was like I was on stage and I was editing like a motherfucker while I was on stage. I was telling a joke while I was thinking about my next joke. And while I was saying the joke I was saying, when I just, a line before I was just about to speak, something in my head would go, don't need it. Just get to the next line. Don't need it. And it was like, oh, Jesus, how come I didn't realize that in England?
And are you able to replicate that in the UK? Or are you interested in doing that? Is it just like a refreshing change, or is it something you want to do?
I only find that gear necessary if I'm doing television stand-up, where you got, or you're doing a slot with like somewhere between 7 and 12 minutes. Then, you got to punch, you got to punch. And I don't believe I would be able to do that if I hadn't had the New York experience. Because, in New York, I'd be on stage and I had like 10 minutes. And I'm like at minute 9. And you see the other comics on the side of the stage and they're looking at it and they're enjoying it. And they're really into it. But then you get around minute 10 and the same comic that's got the eyes open and just looking at you, he's like, your time's up. And if you go like to minute 11, they are mad as fuck with you. They get really shitty with you about it. So it's like, yeah, it was good training. And it was just, so it gave me that gear to be able to like, okay, punch this up and lose this line or two. And I guess it's one of the reasons why I love working in Britain, because British audiences do reward subtlety. I like subtlety. I like subjectivity. I like the other noises that you get from stand-up over here. It's like, the deal is you're just supposed to make them make that sound. And I do love that sound. It's the sound of, what's that sound? Of you force somebody to laugh. It's there's something almost violent about it when you make somebody laugh, especially somebody who don't want to laugh, or somebody who thinks you're a bit smutty, and you make them laugh. There's almost some. It always feels, to me, it feels like a modest form of comedy, sexual assault. But you look for other sounds too, and the other sounds I look for is just like that gasp when you say something, people go, "Ooh!" Like there's a story I do in this show when I'm talking about this woman, this old woman who caught her husband in a compromising position. And there's a moment every night when I say, when her character, she says, my husband walks out past me. And as he walks past me without looking at me, he says, I'll send for my things. And that effectively was the end of 45 years of marriage. And to hear them women just gasp a little, like just, ooh. bastard. I love moments like that.
So this is Reg. I won't go into too much detail on this. It's an expansive kind of a show, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff and a lot more stuff to come. So straight back to it very soon. I mentioned the tour at the beginning of this show. If you are interested in my stand-up comedy, if you have been to comedianscomedian.com/shop and downloaded my albums in the past, thank you to those of you who've bought them on Bandcamp or listened on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere else you get your musical... It is absolutely not musical comedy. I try to say music or comedy and didn't manage it. But if you've listened to my act and you've enjoyed it in the past, I'm very pleased to tell you the show that is going on tour is absolutely my best ever show, and I really, really want you to see it. So do come and see it. comedianscomedian.com/tour. It's got a list of all the dates. Almost all of them are on sale now. There's one or two that aren't, simply because they're so far away in the future. We're nothing if not organised over here at ComCom Towers. And also we're hoping to put some London dates in as well. So there's none on there at the moment, but do check back soon. As you will know, if you have been listening to the recent shows, October is your last chance to get hold of the Thanks Man t-shirts designed by the brilliant American illustrator Polly Becker. So go to comedianscomedian.com/merch to get hold of them. That's only they're only available during October. A load of people have jumped on and booked them in the last few days. Booked them. We're booking t-shirts now. So thank you to those of you who are doing that. I'm very excited. I'm going to get all of those. Well, collate them all together. I feel like after the June pre-sale, I'm a bit more together as to how to get all this done in terms of logistics. But we're going to chuck out a load more, and then that will be your final chance to get one, unless you're going to come and see me on tour and take a chance on me having your correct size in a little suitcase of merch that I knock out of the back of my car. So that's that. Go to comedianscomedian.com/merch for the t-shirts, /tour for all the tour information on Like I Mean It, and oh man, I can't wait. I know I said this at the beginning, but I can't wait. I'm so excited about going on tour, and I'm really pleased to finally make that apparent and a thing that you can get involved with. Shall we do the cavalry again? Some of you were so kind in the last couple of years of like putting up posters locally. It's impossible to tell how well it worked. And whilst I was very, very honoured that so many of you wanted to help out like that, I do want to make the most of your time. So maybe let's think of some other things. The cavalry, if you remember, was in previous tours, people have emailed me and said, yeah, I'll put some posters up in my local place of work or whatever. And that was very kind of them. But I don't want to exploit you. If anyone's got any other sweet ideas on how you yourself can be leveraged to bring 10 mates to the show, then please do get in touch, either on the Facebook group or at info@comedianscomedian.com. That's enough fluff. I'm going to have a bit of a post-amble with you after this episode, but I think it's probably time that we get back to the genuinely brilliant and, as I said before, admirably candid Reginald D. Hunter.
I would say I only really started being funny again about maybe 5-6 months ago, and I had not truly been funny for about 3, maybe 4 years. I had jokes, but I was all technique. I was nothing between the jokes. I was just writing and technique, but being funny is that extra thing. Being funny, you have to have command to be funny. You have to have the command to go, well, I'm gonna do this.
Okay.
Or I'm gonna say it like this. When you're funny, you handle hecklers better. When you're not funny and you know you're up there just doing technique and jokes, you know you're shamming. You know you're getting away with something. You know you're imitating a comedian and you're scared. You're hoping people don't notice. You're using the jokes and the technique as subterfuge. And so I went about 2-3 years of just being subterfuge.
Do you know why that was?
Yeah, I know. Of course I know. I live with it. I ate with it. Of course I know.
Why was it?
I had real bad gas. How about that, okay? Let's leave it at that. I had bad gas. Stop looking at me like that. I feel your fucking look, okay? I feel it.
I'm interested. Obviously, you know why I'm interested. I mean, you could tell me any version of it you want. I'm interested in how it affects your creativity. To go through a period like that, I think all comics listening to this will have experienced some moment of going, I'm faking this. I'm forging it. I'm relying on the technique. I don't mean this.
Okay, I tell you, if it's to help other comedians, because Reg care about other comedians. I was going through a period where I was simultaneously, I was going through a breakup. I lost my best friend, and then I lost my girlfriend, and I was probably enjoying drugs a little too much. And my mother, who had died like 7 or 8 years earlier, I had promised myself that when she died that I wasn't gonna fucking cry, because that's what she wanted. My mother had this real thing about, my mother used to hold death over my head a lot. From the time I was 5, she would say things like, you better do all you can, because when I'm gone, the world hates a motherless child. And it's just every time it's just like once a week, it's just at some point I'm gonna die one day and you're gonna be left out to dry and the Lord gonna take me home and she had a death fetish, not fetish, but she had a death thing because both her parents were dead by the time she was 10 and I remember as a kid, I was always afraid that she was gonna die, and I'd go by her room just to make sure that the Lord hadn't come by and the rapture hadn't occurred and all of that. And I remember, I felt so shitty about this for years. When I was 26, she was following me around the house, fucking with me about something. And she follows me into my room and she said, you just don't understand. But one day the Lord gonna take me home and you're gonna see what it's like to not have a mother. And I looked at her and I said, you know what, Mama? When you die, I hope death is everything you've been dreaming it's gonna be. In fact, I suspect that the only thing that you would dislike about the experience is that you can only do it once. And she said, you just don't understand. So when she died, I mean, me and her had a contentious relationship. So when she died, I was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. And of course, there's psychological and emotional ramifications for that, and it's gonna come out eventually. And so, just all at once, and it seemed like the trigger thing that happened was me and my best friend falling out, and that just a trigger of, and so all of a sudden, after all these years of being in stand-up, all of a sudden, I was afraid to go on stage, and I couldn't let anybody know. I was afraid of what I was really gonna say. I was afraid that I was gonna just be in the middle of a joke and just start going, fuck everybody, fuck you. I was scared I was gonna do that. So I was tight. And quite frankly, and I knew even at the time that I needed one of two things. I needed psychiatric help, or I needed to go and be on somebody's farm for 8 months and not do nothing. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have time for either. My career was, and the people who rely on me, like, the people who connected to me, whose fortunes are tied in with my own. If I get a little bit erratic, it makes them crazy. Anytime, if me and you have a connection and one of us jerks suddenly, the other person feels it. So I was like, I don't want nobody to worry too much and just, yeah. And so, and also when you're in that state of mind, you don't find very much funny. And it's just, I didn't find myself funny, I didn't like myself. And the world started looking dingy. And I didn't have anybody to really talk to about it. I didn't have anybody I could talk to about it who could advise me on shared experience. Everybody else would just be like, oh, you'll be all right. Oh, get a hold of yourself. So, yeah, I just had to go through that. And and I'm on the opposite side of it now. And the weird thing is, like, my mom's dead, right? I love the fuck out of her now. She's so funny. I mean, I wish we'd had a better relationship. I wish I had been more of an adult to know how to deal with that. But it's just, and also as well, a lot of young comics that they don't have no edge and no sharpness to them, or they don't have any impact. It's because they ain't heard enough yet. They ain't been through. Just, you need to get punched in the face by life once or twice, and then have to get up and be funny. It's like what they say about the blues. It's not enough to know what the notes are. You have to understand why they need to be played. I think that's what enables you to better get that gasp out of people, or that, ooh. It's like, and so, yeah. And I have to say, for the first 13, 14 years of my career, it had been a breeze. I had not had a true challenge to my confidence. I mean, I would say from my first gig on, everyone around me was telling me with amazed eyes how good I was. And it was like, I hadn't been up against nothing that beat me or compromised me. And that's the thing that Pryor said too. It's when he came back after that very first gig, after getting burnt up, because that's the thing. Comedians, we have a veneer of protection when you don't know what our issues are unless we tell you. And that's a bit of we're a bit invulnerable then. But when the audience knows about your shit, and that's why it was classic when Pryor went back on stage for the first time and he looked at the audience and he just went, well, shit. And the audience just went, yeah, we know, nigga. Yeah, yeah, we know. God damn. Yeah. And I felt exposed and compromised. Even though my audience and fans didn't really, but amongst the people in my life, I felt like I was, I had at that point been in Britain about 14, 15 years. And it's a long time for somebody like me from the deep south to go without sun every day, or optimism, or somebody who could talk to you about your feelings without going, oh, stiff up a lip, oh, don't be a baby. And it's just, I needed to cry. And I still hadn't done it yet. Probably because I still think crying is kind of faggy. Certainly my mama would say so. My mama would be like, you big old faggot. You crying because I'm dead? I told you I was going to die, nigga. That's just how she talked.
Yeah. Yeah. So was there a particular point at which you felt, I'm on the other side of this? What was it that happened? If you didn't get 8 months on a farm, did you get psychiatric help? Did you get farm time? What was it that turned around? When we find ourselves in those points of going, what is it that's going to change now? And it came to a head.
Years ago, they used to do this at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and it was very progressive. They used to have a 24-hour on-call psychiatrist for the comedians.
No. Oh, mate. They used to. What went wrong? Who abused that facility?
Money, I reckon. If money get tight, that'd be the first kind of thing to go.
Of course.
But I participated in some of that the last year I was there. Or the last year they were doing that program. And I basically sat with the man and I was like, how much does it cost? And he said, he says, it's free. He said, normally I charge like 100 pounds an hour. And I said, how many sessions does man usually need? And he said, well, I normally recommend between 6 and 9. And I said, well, I only really need an hour. And he said, why you say that? I said, well, I already worked out what's wrong with me. I just need to hear it out loud, saying it to another person. And I told him everything I knew was fucked up with me. And he goes, you're definitely one of the most intriguing people I've ever met. I think we should meet more often. I'm like, no, I'm good. Because I know they don't have the answers. What they can do is help facilitate you find your own answers. But I'd already done that work. I just need someone else to proofread what I... that helped. And another thing that was wrong with me, I stopped having sex. That's a whole bit McGill to get into. When I first started achieving notoriety in stand-up, like when the money and the notoriety started coming in, I noticed that there was a predatory shift between me chasing some women and some women chasing me now. And it just seemed like it was a lot more easier to get in trouble. It's like my sister told me, she said, be careful in Britain. She says, because sexual misdeeds can start your career in America. In England, it can end them. And so it's like, I knew in my heart I was a hoe. and I knew that I valued my career, and my career also is what helps take care of my family and my closest friends. So the best way to ensure that I didn't fuck my career with my penis was that I just would just not mess with women at all. And Picasso said that a lot of creative energy comes from sexual energy. And a lot of my early careers is when I was being a substantial hoe. I mean, the jokes was flowing. I mean, and I think part of the boost that a man gets, I mean, certain probably women too, but certainly for me anyway, the boost that I got, it wasn't so much about physical gratification. It made your ego come. It made you feel like this unhavable angel, let me have her. So that must mean that I'm worth having.
Yeah.
And so that I would blow off of that for a week or two. And I had that consistently, but around 2010, that dried up too. But I was very analytical about it. I was like, well, sexual fuel is a great fuel, but there are substitutes.
Yeah. I'm sure a psychologist or a psychiatrist would tell us that if you get addicted to that, I'm not going to use the word addiction, but if the idea of, like you said, making your ego come, like that has got to be a basis for a lot of people, a lot of artists, a lot of comedians, people in the public eye, people who do end up getting chased by, as you say, women or men or whoever. That idea we can see that happen to other comics. We can see people falling down that rabbit hole. And
let me stop you right there, because making your ego come, I think you can have a connotation like that's a bad thing. But when the audience laughs at a joke that you just wrote and they laugh good, your ego comes in too.
Absolutely.
And it's just you have to find healthy ways to make your ego come without hurting other people.
I think that's what I hope that's where I was going.
I couldn't see it.
that if you connect your own feelings of self-worth to whether or not you can make your ego come or make an unhavable angel or have an unhavable angel, if you connect that to whether you feel worth something as a person, then that's a fast track to unhappiness.
Yeah.
So
I came out of that. I guess it was just stone. I call it my voice of clarity. Sometimes it sounds like my mama. Sometimes it just sounds like some ethereal nigga talking to me. But this is voice in my head sometimes. And it just said, you got great friends. You got people that respect you, like your work, revere you even. A lot of women want to know you. How much more self-worth do you need, nigga? Well, what other proof is there on this earth that you are worth something? What? Is it more money? Certainly not more ass. What is it? And just, maybe the people that are telling you that you are great, maybe they're not quite right, but maybe there's something there. Why don't you stop your belly aching some? And I think I guess this is where the old British pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality comes in. That comes upon you realize, well, this is what there is. Make something of it or move on. But either way, stop your fucking whining. Because I know this is probably a jumble of stuff I'm telling you, but I thought we were just going to talk about jokes.
We are talking about jokes.
Yeah, okay. My 2015 tour, that was the hardest. For the first time in my career, I was scared to go on stage. And consistently, I was coming off early. You know, the audience would be like, I was enjoying the show, it was okay, he just left. And it was like, and also when you're being labeled with the moniker of being cool or strong or the coolest man in comedy, you get scared of showing any vulnerability. And you get locked into your own sort of, it's like, and my mama put in me as well. My mama hated weak men. She hated it. And that was one of the things that drove me. I spent the balance of my life trying to prove to people, because my mama told me that I was weak when I was a kid. I spent the balance of my career trying to prove to people that I was not weak, and accidentally gave myself a comedy career in the process. So she's to be credited for that. But also, being afraid of being weak also makes you afraid to ask for help sometimes. Or even admitting that you are fallible, or that you're struggling, you need help. And so what happened was I got so afraid. And so I just stopped going anywhere. Unless I had to perform somewhere, I just stayed home. And I stayed home. I was avoiding the sex. I was avoiding the trouble. I was feeling I was in a hole and I didn't like myself. I just stayed home. And then that has another effect on your comedy because nothing's coming in to inform your work. You're not having the experiences. And when you're having sex or when you're dating, at least you're having that energy and that friction, and it goes into your writing. I was talking to this woman the other day and she said, I didn't have that anymore. Or I was with my woman the other day and she did, you didn't have that anymore. And I wasn't going out to parties, I wasn't going to museums, I wasn't going anywhere anymore. And it was like, I didn't have nothing to talk about other than what was innately coming out of here. So, some of it was kind of loopy, I'm sitting at home watching TV and I'm looking at the news, I'm looking at inhumanity, I'm looking at corruption and crime and just people being mean to each other. And I'm starting to wonder, why the fuck am I trying to recycle paper? And it works okay, but something is inorganic about it because it doesn't have the inclusion of life in it.
Gotcha.
It's just you sitting there. It's like going into a dead sprint, coming out of a dead stop. Whereas if you're just jogging and then you gradually pick up pace and then you add this and that, and I just...
Did you feel that about the material on the 2015 tour?
Oh, yeah.
The performance and...
The material was stayed. It didn't have any life to it. And also it's where I got to a point that I was scared all the time. I didn't want any trouble. I had gotten into several media skirmishes with people, and I was having skirmishes in my personal life. So I just got to the point where I didn't want to have no trouble. So I was trying to do what appeared to be edgy, but wasn't edgy. Jesus. But then that night came. That night of thunderbolt that you need. And that usually comes when you're just the wrong side of tired, or you have a little bit of cold, or you don't like the man that's supposed to be paying you. Whatever. And something in you goes, just say what you fucking think. Fuck the consequences. And you do it and it works and you go, oh yeah, I used to do this all the time. Oh, okay, man, I think I'm gonna start doing this again. And I think the broken leg was the icing on the cake. I had come out of it like maybe 10 months earlier, maybe 8 months earlier. But then the broken leg just gave you a chance to sit back and go, you know what? All of my pain has been existential, emotional, what my mother would call invisible and faggy. Broken leg, that's tangible, you can feel that. If I get a chance to run again, I'm gonna run hard. If I get a chance to talk to some people again, I'm gonna talk hard, And it was like, this show I'm doing this year, this tour I just did, it was, for me, an apology to my audience for the previous tour. It's like, I'm sorry I was such a shit the before. And it's like, so let me give myself to it the best I can and see if I can find that groove that we all love.
Is there a way, have you considered saying that to your audience? Do you say that in your material? Because when you made the allusion to Pryor earlier on, he came out, everyone knew what had happened. People are aware, I guess, on some level that you were involved in, like you say, media skirmishes, but we don't necessarily, it's not like these issues you've been going through are public knowledge. So I just wonder, would that be easier to deal with an audience if they knew and you could walk on and go, well, shit, this is where I'm at?
The great Tony Woods taught me, he asked me, and we were in Utrecht, Holland.
I know Utrecht.
Yeah. He said to me, he was teaching me too. It was like very much like he was my Mr. Miyagi. He said, what's the first and most important rule to stand up? And I said, be funny. He said, no, that's number 2. He said, the first important rule of comedy is be interesting. If you be interesting for long enough, you can go ages without a punchline. I'm sorry, what was the original question?
I was interested in knowing, that's a really good point. And I want to, that's the second time you've mentioned rules. You mentioned John Gordillo and the golden rules that he kind of instilled in you, or that you worked with him with. So we've maybe...
Oh, I was talking about comedy, and that why don't I say those things that I just said to you? Why don't I say those things on stage? Well, John Goodill's rules were, remember first and foremost, you are there to be laughed at. Check your fucking ego at the door. Check your need to have a psychiatric session at the door. If it's funny, yes, but you are there to be laughed at. And when I was in my dark phase and I was scared and everything, I was not prepared to be laughed at. I was still too close to my own problems. Sometimes you need distance before you can laugh at them. And talking to you now about those things, I've been thinking, I know I'm going to do something with it, but I don't know if it's stand-up. I don't know if it's going to be in a book or a film, or I don't know, but it's like, I mean, there's something inherently funny about a man who is a lifetime member of the Ho Club having to quit cold turkey and becoming less funny. But no, I don't quite know what to do with that yet. In fact, you know, I'm pleased that I'm able to even talk to you about it, because if we did this interview a year ago, I wouldn't have even alluded to it. So I must be getting some traction with it.
Let's talk about Tony Woods, whose act, I have to say, I don't know his act. I think I met him once in one of the snow bombing festivals, one of the altitude festival. What were the circumstances where you came to work with him, or that mentor relationship evolved?
I didn't think much of him when I first saw him. He's highly regarded. I mean, like, he's loved on both sides of the pond, and he is considered the quintessential international comedian, the quintessential international comedian who's quote unquote never made it, you know. And a lot of people have borrowed from Tony. They say Dave Chappelle borrowed a whole persona from Tony. Well, Tony said that. But actually, though, yeah, he right. I mean, Chappelle don't use it as much no more, but Chappelle's early days when he was coming up, that's sort of like just, yeah, what's up? Just kind of sleepy. That's Tony Woods. I was working with Tony. This is what happened. I had worked with him previously, and this is when I was coming up, and I was grinding, and I was a comedy fundamentalist. I was very judgmental and harsh on other people. I ain't say nothing to him, but I thought a black man coming out of New York and the DC area, which he was, supposed to say something, and he didn't say nothing. He just made people laugh over stupid jokes. So this is like my third year in comedy. This is to dig my ego. Tony Woods and I were booked to do this show. I was supposed to go on second, and he was closing. Now, I was already closing gigs by my second year, and quite frankly, my estimation of myself was I was better than Tony. But they had him closing, so I was a bit huffy about that. So I was gonna go on stage, and I was gonna do my Jerry Lee Lewis and like, follow that, nigger. I was gonna do that. I went and I did my best stuff. In the second slot, just slamming. When I came off stage, the audience gave me a standing ovation. And I was like, I think we can put this as another W. Another W in the column. Tony was late. He had missed his flight, which he always does, or he did back then. And he had just been driven in from Rotterdam, and he goes on stage, and he's just all like flopping around and just slow talking, and he keeps doing this one joke over and over. And it's like, and he's just making himself laugh. What's the joke? He's like, Sandy, the midget pony, who was supposed to sing tonight, it will not be here. Unfortunately, he's unable to because he's a little hoarse. He just kept saying this over and over and giggling to himself. And then the audience started going with it. And when he came off stage, they gave him a standing ovation. And I was like, no, you fools! He's played you! He didn't even do one real joke! You fools! He goes back on stage and he does like 10 extra minutes, and the whole time he's doing this extra 10 minutes, they are standing, they stay standing. And they take their cigarette lighters and they hold them up in the air like it's a fucking concert. And it's just, I hated everybody in that room. I hated them. So I went and I got back in the van that was driving us back to the hotel, and I was sitting there with my arms crossed. I was mad. And Tony came and sat next to me, and he's like, oh. And then I suddenly just looked at him like, how did you do that? And he said, do what? He says, that shit you just did. That bullshit you just got away with. How the fuck you made them love you for that bullshit right there? And he said, oh yeah, you young buck. He said, you don't know about rope-a-doping? And I said, rope-a-doping? He said, yeah, that's what Ali did when he fought Foreman. He said, when Ali fought Foreman, he said, remember, Ali came out of retirement. George Foreman was the Mike Tyson of his day. Ali was 32, and they asked Ali in the press, he was like, Ali, how you expect to fight George Foreman? And Ali said, well, two things. He said, first of all, Big George, there's some things that he ain't never heard the referee say. Things like round 5, round 6. He ain't never heard the man say that. And he said, also, he said, we're going to rope-a-dope. And the media went rope-a-dope. So I was doing like all these sparring sessions. Ali was doing body work, endurance work. And when he'd be with his sparring partners, he practiced putting his fists up like this, like up against his face and just up against the ropes. When the fight came, Big George came out, boom, boom. Ali would grab him, go up against the rope. Second round, Big George come out, boom, boom. Ali would grab him. A referee would separate him. Ali would be laying up against the ropes. Somewhere around about the third or fourth round, Big George was like, whoa, whoa. And that's when Ali would grab him and let him go. And then Ali would go, take that with you. And then somewhere around the fifth, Ali just started sticking and moving. This is what Tony's telling me. And then he says, you ain't gonna be able to have your best energy every time you go out. Sometimes you're gonna have the flu. Sometimes you're gonna just don't be done broke up with your woman. Sometimes the man ain't paying you right. Sometimes you don't like the motherfucker, but you still have to entertain these people. He says, I have the flu and I'm exhausted. And I had to entertain these people the best with what I had. It is your duty to make them laugh. But it was the next night that he changed my life. That's when we was in Utrecht. There was a British comic on named Simon Fox. He was on first. They handed him his ass back. I went on second, and I got away with it, but you wouldn't want to make a living off the difference. Tony goes on stage, and he does 50 of the most beautiful minutes I've ever seen. Standing ovation, encore. And when he came and sat next to me, I was sitting at the little table where the comedians are, and he came and sat next to me, and he was laughing, and he slapped me on the leg, and he said, it ain't about the alcohol, it ain't about the weed, it ain't about no mushrooms, it ain't about no cocaine, it is about putting the children to bed and taking them home. And he said, and I was trying to speak, and I was literally trying to speak, and no words were coming out. And he said, don't try to speak. He said, I know exactly what you're going through. He said, that look you got on your face right now? He said, about 10 years ago, he said, another comedian put that look on my face. And about 10 years before that, another comedian put that look on his face. And I wasn't gonna work that hard tonight, but I did that because I knew you thought you was betting me, and you're not. Now go get a notebook and a pen, and let me tell you what you're doing wrong. And we sat there right in that club with all these girls coming around. Can we have an autograph? And I was an au pair in North Carolina, and he was like, bitches, leave us alone. He said, the first rule of comedy is be interesting. Then the second rule, and he just laid out the rules to me. And he said, and I'm telling you this, he says, because you got the gift. And he said, before long, you're going to start putting that look on people's face.
That's incredible. I mean, what I love most, I think, about that story is the idea of the lineage of comedy. I sometimes feel like comedy is a thing in itself. It's like a living, breathing thing that we all come back to. I was having a conversation with someone last night, and I described this new wave of kind of absurdism that's happening at the moment. Loads of comics have kind of been inspired by Dr. Brown, Sam Simmons, Trivia Wakenshaw. There's a new genre of absurdism. And I said, I was chatting to Bob Slayer, and I talked about how a particular act I'd seen at this festival, I started off thinking, oh, this is just another guy doing this. And then I felt like actually by midway through the show, I was like, no, he's giving as much back to the pot as he's taking out. Mm-hmm. And I think that the longevity of that, the idea that comics will put that look on each other's faces every 10 years, something like that, that makes me feel, I think that makes us all feel like it is a calling, it is a thing, it's a thing in its own right. And I think that that is something I think of when I think of Reginald D. Hunter. I think of that, like, you seem to be someone who breathes it. Do you know what I mean? That you eat and sleep and breathe it. Not just because you're obsessive about it, but just because it is something else. It's something tangible in the world to you.
Well, Ali, you know the comedian that put that look on Tony's face? It was Bernie Mac.
Really?
And Tony told me, he said, I was opening for Bernie Mac in Miami. And we was just doing club there. And he said I had a real bad fever. And he said I was on first and I went on stage. And as soon as I came off stage, I passed out. Turns out I had pneumonia. And he said I woke up about 18 hours later in the hospital. And Bernie Mac was sitting right there. And I said, what happened? He said, you got pneumonia, kid. And I said, oh, man. I said, what are you doing here? He said, because you here. And you ain't got nobody down here. So I'm here. And I said, I didn't know you even liked me. He says, yeah, I like you. And he said, you've been putting that look on people's face. And he said, you got all the tools. You're just missing one thing. And I said, what's that? One woman. One woman who loves you but ain't over-impressed with your bullshit. One woman who knows how your soul works and knows how to keep you grounded. A woman who understands that keeping you grounded doesn't mean assaulting your spirit. One woman. And when Tony told me that, I said, so did you manage that? Did you have the one woman? And he said, I got it down to 5.
I saw you before I saw your show the other night, which was fantastic. I saw you, I think the last time I'd seen you live before that was in New Zealand. And in terms of the timeline, that must have been dark, Reg.
Yeah, that was. I was rope-a-doping like a motherfucker. Oh man.
I made a note after that gig. There were two things that struck me about that gig. One was that you were getting more applause breaks than laughs. And I thought, this audience have bought Reg. They like Reg. They get it. But, I mean, I didn't know at the time you were through that period of your life, you know, and all that stuff had gone on. But it was really interesting to see an audience go with someone, I guess now, looking at it now, someone rope-a-doping. They were going with it. But I was thinking, this isn't the Reg I remember.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I'm eager to go back. I'm eager to go back to Europe and tour because I was in that dark phase when I went there too. It feels like a bit sci-fi. It's like I want to go back in time and set things right. We have to go back in time, and I'm taking my Asian with me because he understands the space-time continuum. But yeah, it's like, but I'm proud of myself about that in that I knew that I was trying to heal myself on the fly. How do I keep my career going and flowing? How do I maintain my bookability while healing myself on the quiet? And I think they'll still have me back. If they give me another crack at them, I'm gonna show them something.
One of the other, I said there were two things. The other thing that struck me about that set was a bit of material that I found really problematic. Can I talk to you about this? Can I?
Yeah.
Now we know now we're dealing with Dark Reg. Do you know which bit I'm talking
Hell
about?
no! I thought all of that shit was fucked up, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I kind of, that makes me glad to hear it, because at the time I remember it was a bit of material about women, and it was a material, I think the end of the bit was, and I don't want to, let's think back. I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I
never talk about women.
Well, I mean, maybe we should talk about the wider scope first.
No, tell me the joke.
It was a bit where I think the resolution was that if a woman has been sexually assaulted and doesn't mention it and then brings it up later, having not originally claimed that it happened, then you've got to question her motives. It's something to do with, like, you were implying that someone would do that strategically. If someone is raped and doesn't make a thing of it at the time and then brings it up later,
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. My memory of that joke is simply the message is tell the police. Because if you don't tell the police, then nothing happens. The perpetrator goes and does it again, but I don't recollect saying that. What you saying that the joke was about, that sounds like something I would have thought or felt, but it doesn't feel to me like something I would have said. But you're very, very prescient dude.
I was watching it with Michelle Acorn, a Kiwi comedian and a writer and really interesting person who I had her on this podcast, and we talked about it at the time. That's why it sticks in my mind, because we were both really surprised by certainly what we interpreted from that material. We were looking at each other during the gig. We sat near each other and we were going, fuck. And I think, like I said, I'm pleased to hear this.
So you're saying the basis of what you both took out of it was, I was saying that if a woman doesn't report it at the time but does later, then you have to question whether or not it actually happened.
I think what we interpreted was that if a woman doesn't report at the time but does later, then you have to question her motives for revealing it later. You implied it was somehow strategic. And we were looking at each other open-mouthed going, fuck, that seems unkind at absolute best.
It's the very last part that doesn't sound quite like me, that if she's reporting it later, then it must be strategic. That doesn't sound like me there, but the rest of it sounds like me.
Sure, I mean, it's definitely the territory, right? The territory is uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
The territory is finding out what's really going on.
Yeah.
Talking about things that worry people and going, no, well, guys, we've got to talk about this. And I think at the time it just seemed, it seemed difficult. I remember thinking, fuck, Reg, where's this going?
There was a phase when in my angry dark phase, when I was getting groans from women in the audience about it, and I was like, and the groans I was getting was like, they were saying that they didn't want to see me that way. It was like, I didn't want to see you as someone who feel that way, or like, because I set myself up in the joke is like, how should I say this without giving away the punchline of the joke? My reaction to the women's reactions in the show was, the point of the joke is to tell the fucking police. That's the point. Oh man, this is, I wonder how many other people thought that.
I realise I'm putting you on the spot like a couple of years after the event, and that's not it's not a fair thing to do. I'm not trying to Paxman you here. Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't feel bad about that. This ain't exactly a Senate subcommittee or nothing like that.
Do you remember the reaction that you had at the Apollo gig? For not this tour, but the last tour, and two women stood up and told that joke.
Mm-mm.
You know, remember?
I feel like I'm going to give Cash a microphone. Let's just.
But you remember, like, two women had stood up because they misinterpreted what you were saying, and they thought that you were attacking women as a whole.
Mm.
And it's the kind of the reaction that we often get even on Facebook.
Yeah,
sure.
That people kind of misunderstand the intent.
I have an issue. I have an ongoing thing in my career, particularly on stage, where if I'm saying something about gender roles or women, and women feel it's unflattering, they tend to personalize it as if I'm talking to them about them. and so they can react as if, they often react as if I poked them with a hot poker or something like that. And it's like, I'm talking about you. But then my mama used to say, a hurt dog will holler.
Do you think there's a chance that they're reacting because they consider you are talking about, it's not that they're taking it personally so much as they're taking it on behalf of women and going,
what's the difference?
Shouldn't say that about women.
What's the fucking difference? They're taking it on behalf of all women, because all of it presumes that as a man, I don't have a right to comment on women's stuff, and that's bullshit. I mean, as much as they feel free to comment about the state of manhood, and since we both rely on each other, there's an interdependency between the genders, then yes, we have the right to comment on each other. And I feel like as long as I'm articulate and open to changing my mind and presenting it in that way, then yeah, I've seen black people be like that whenever white people comment about black issues, and it's bullshit. It is no different. It's like, you couldn't possibly know what it's like. You couldn't possibly understand racism because you're white. Fuck off. Speak to English people who try to live in Scotland, see if they don't understand racism. And see, for me, I remember that the point of doing a lot of those jokes is that the protectionism that a lot of people have in communities, whether it's gender or race or religious. And it's like sometimes the person that has the answer for your community does not come from your community. I actually think that civil rights leaders in America, I think since Martin Luther King, they've all sucked. We would have come out better if we were represented by some old Scottish woman. I really do. So yeah. But anyway, stuff like that, man, I try to shy away from.
well, this is it. So that, it seems to me, that was part of the dark reg era, was it? That whereby did you find when you were doing material that you now think of as that's not what I wanted to say, or the performance wasn't there, or the material wasn't what I want it to be now? The
problem I found with living in Europe and traveling abroad and being in life where so many non-ethnics populate my world is that I have to bite my tongue all the time. There's a subtlety that's appreciated over here, an indirectness that's appreciated over here. And when you're in a dark space and you're dealing with your issues, you're trying to find clever ways, non-confrontational ways to talk out your issues. And it's like, but y'all don't like to discuss nothing openly, nothing that's murky. And I remember at the time I was feeling like, well, this is the reason why things don't get changed. Because you look at America's racial problems now. We fought the Civil War, but nothing was resolved. Nothing was changed. We just stopped fighting for a long time. But that's why those racist white people, they still mad because nothing was resolved. A lot of those places and people in Texas, Mississippi, they still want to secede. It hasn't changed. And it was like, so I remember in my dark phase, I was like, why aren't things fucking changing? And I was mad about that too. And I was also sexually angry too, because I wasn't fucking. And I think out of all the things a person can do with their sexual anger, I told a few jokes that made people think at least. I didn't go around punching women and raping nobody or starting bar fights with niggas. I didn't start shooting up heroin or nothing. I mean, I have a feeling that when I get through all of this totally and I look back, I have a feeling I'm gonna be slightly proud of how I carried it. One of my favorite stories, or man stories about carrying it, is John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was fucking terrified, but he had to carry it. There's a famous story that the Friday before they announced about the missiles being in Cuba, Kennedy was supposed to speak at New York University. And his press secretary had heard that the speech had been canceled because Kennedy had a cold. And Schlesinger said, I had just had breakfast with him. He was fine. I knew something was up. And he said, we got in the limousine. It was just him and I in the back. And he had an occasional cigarette every now and again, but he was chain smoking now. And I said, sir, is there something wrong? And as he was stepping out his cigarette, he says, you're goddamn right there is. And this time you better grab your balls. He was scared. But how do you carry it? How do you make the thing continue even though you're scared witless? That's what the dark period was. I was scared all the time. Hate. And when people are scared for long enough, it tends to make them become hateful. Fear is the beginning of hate. And racist white people in America, that's fear. They're afraid of becoming extinct. They're afraid of being the low man on the totem pole. Once we move into our flat, because our thing's in storage now, we'll pull up the tapes and we'll see. Because we have the tapes from those exact shows. And I know you ain't full of shit. It's just, I
I think it's more to do. It's like when you hear a trigger word, almost because it's happened this Edinburgh in one instance.
Trigger words. Yeah, sometimes, and that's another thing about you and your friend Acorn. Y'all might have been triggered by just some of the words I was using, because we live in a climate now where it's real easy to offend. If you're not Jewish and you're talking about Jewish people, it's real easy to get people back up. If you're not black and you're talking about black people, it's easy to get people back up. If you're not a woman and you're talking about women's issues boldly, it's real easy to get people's back up. So I advise you and Acorn to go back and look at the tapes of yourselves a few years ago and see where you was at.
Matt, I'm not disagreeing with that.
We all need to look at where we was at. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, about 2-3 weeks back, and this hasn't happened on tour at all. We've had one walkout, and this is like, I mean, to me, Reg, it was the most innocuous thing, because there's plenty of other things that they can walk out. But
This woman walked out 10 minutes into the show.
Yeah.
And I was doing this riff about, that riff I do about the word retarded.
Yeah.
That's what sent her out.
Yeah.
And she took it as if I was saying that I was putting down retarded people or people with Down syndrome or something like that. And actually, I was talking about just the use of the word.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, it's a good thing she left, because if that upset her, the rest of the show, I mean.
Do you feel it's harder now that everyone is, because everyone's online, everyone's got a forum, everyone's got an outlet, the speed at which people are outraged by things seems to have increased. Do you feel like the territory has changed during your life as a comedian as to what is sayable and what's
definitely
supposedly
definitely. The comedio-political climate has changed.
And are there any advantages to it having changed? Or do you see all of those changes? I mean, do you see those changes as negative, positive, skewed in one particular direction?
My mom taught me, she said, you don't have to identify something as good or bad as long as you know that it is so. The change is so. So I don't think about it in good or bad terms. It's frustrating sometimes. But see, comedy needs that. Comedy is nothing more than a reaction to something. And if we don't have something to react to, then it's just you're trying to create something in a vacuum. Comedy needs criticism. It needs politics. It needs bad relationships. It needs people who get upset easily. It needs to react to something. And quite frankly, I feel like I'm about 85% back to where I need to be. But the reason I know I ain't 15% is because I don't have near as many white people getting upset and walking out as I should do. Because y'all a bit oversensitive right now anyway. But don't worry, but I'm gonna straighten that out between now and Ireland.
When's Ireland? When are you in Ireland?
Is that October? Yeah, October. So I get to go and marinate a little bit with this leg, and then listen to the tapes of this month, listen to the mistakes. It was like that woman marching out over the word retard or retarded. That was a good sign. It's a good sign that I'm starting to get that back. It's like when you make white people storm out over stupid shit, you're doing that's for me anyway. And so yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
To wrap up then, what do you still want from comedy that you don't have?
Anal sex. No, I'm sorry.
Palace.
Palace.
Palace?
I certainly would like some money. I mean, the money has not mattered to me up until now, and I like that about myself. I like the fact that I feel like before my mama got sick, my mama and my sister got sick at the same time. Mama had a stroke and my sister had breast cancer. And that's when I started getting serious about the money, because we had the kind of insurance that poor niggas have in Georgia. And so, but before that, I was all about apprenticing. I was content to just learn my craft, because I knew that in old England, that motherfucker could apprentice for 20 years before he set his shingle out. And I think that we suffer from not doing that anymore. And
I mean, you've got 1 year left of your apprenticeship in comedy.
well, I don't know if I got that, but I think I'm well on my way to my raconteurship. And what else do I want from comedy? I think what I've always wanted from the comedy, live comedy, is you're always in search of that flawless show. In baseball, they call it a no-hitter, a perfect game. Come close a few times. Enough for it to be like that first hit of heroin where you're always chasing it the rest of your life. It's like, and whatever you saw in New Zealand, it's all grist for the mill, because I think I'm gonna reach it one day. And I just think, ultimately what I want from comedy is that when it's over, when I'm done with it, whatever other phase of life I go on to, I want to be able to sleep peacefully at night thinking, I did all I could with it. I couldn't have done no more or better than what I did with it. I don't want, it would nag me to my grave if I felt like there was a level that was reachable that I didn't, or there was something that was in my grasp to say, but I just pussied out of it. That actually scares me. It's just, I remember the first time I did TV stand-up, and I didn't know what to do. I was in a quandary between, should I do like my A-list stuff, or should I do my B and C stuff? And I was home in Georgia, and I was talking to my dad about it. My dad, he don't know shit about comedy. He don't know that. And he said, it was up to me, boy. He said, throw your first best stuff. He said, if you throw your first best stuff and they beat you, you can live with that. But if you throw your second or third best stuff and they beat you, that's gonna bother you till you're an old man, son.
So last question then. We've talked a lot about the rules, the principles, the mentorship, or that mentorship, inverted commas, from Tony, from John Gordillo. What would you want to pass on? What would your rules be to the next person, the 10 years down the line?
Before I answer that, I would like to say that during the dark period, I was in the process of mentoring a couple of comedians, and I got so immersed in my darkness that I did not leave them in good stead. I will hope to go back and correct that. One of my lofty dreams is I would like to direct an Edinburgh show. I'd like to direct a comedian. I believe I have something to offer.
Are you open to approaches? Because if you say that on this show, you're going to get 1,000 emails tomorrow.
Yeah. As long as they're cool with me saying no. I mean, it's like my dreamy dream. This is my dreamy dream. This is just a dreamy dream now. My dreamy dream is to have enough money to like build like a dormitory, like, like 10 rooms, and just house 10 comedians, and just for like 3 months, just they come and they be. They come and they be. We talk about comedy. We watch stuff. We go to see comedy. We work on approaches and stuff like that. And it's just, and it's not that I believe I have all the answers, but I believe I have a way of getting to the answers. And just, yeah, Whenever he has something to say, he starts breathing. It's like a serial killer or something.
I thought you were talking about this dormitory thing. And if you could still keep the wheelchair, it would be like a weird version of X-Men.
No, Alex, the joke is within you. The joke has always been within you.
So that was Reg. Thank you so much to Reg for coming on the show. Thank you to Cash for his contributions as well. And thank you, Jen Palmer-Violet, who helped me set up that interview. And that's that. I enjoyed it enormously. I found that one pretty electrifying. It's weird, isn't it? Because the show isn't me, so I don't need to be humble about it. But at the same time, I don't want to show off about, the thing itself. I really enjoyed that, and I really feel like I got a lot closer to who Reg is. I hope you did too. Give me your feedback on that show. Let me know if you think we went far enough. I'm sort of, like I said, I'm not out to ambush anybody. I did have some issues with some of the stuff he said on stage in previous years. He's a very controversial comic and benefits from that enormously, and also has been involved in other controversies that we didn't even get into. But I wanted to talk specifically about the things I'd heard him say. At the same time, it's not, you know what I mean? I'm not doing like a documentary on anyone. I'm not trying to catch anyone out, but I think we started to get into, I think Reg's resistance to some of that last line of questioning was quite interesting, and maybe there's more of a conversation to be had. Maybe we can talk further to Reg about that. So very, very pleased that he came on the show, and very pleased that he talked so openly. And that's that for now. You know where the T-shirts and the tour stuff is all... I mean, I keep saying all of the endings of the websites, but you can basically go to comedianscomedian.com and work from there. It's all fairly self-explanatory. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. And if you'd care to stick around, I will talk you through a bit of a post-amble in just a moment. Bye for now. So, how was that, everyone? I was pretty nervous going into that interview, and this is weird because obviously I'm recording this little post-amble several months after recording it, and due to the vagaries of the production process, I haven't listened back to all of it right now. I'm going on memory. I suppose it's a good time to be having these sorts of conversations. Let's take this away from Reg for the moment. Let's talk about gender. Let's talk about women, and let's talk about MeToo, which, unless you're completely alienated from social media, you will have noticed trending over the last week or so in the wake of Harvey Weinstein's, the allegations made about Harvey Weinstein. To fill you in, a lot of women have been Facebooking and tweeting with the hashtag, but I'm only assuming they've been tweeting, let's stick to the facts, Facebooking with the hashtag MeToo to talk about their own experiences of being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted. And I, like a lot of men, like a lot of people, I'm going to make an assumption here. I'm going to assume that women knew how much this was happening. I'm equally going to assume that men were aware it went on, but probably, like me, have been utterly sickened and staggered and hurt to see just how prevalent, to see, and I'm not making an exaggeration here, almost every woman on my timeline talking about their experiences, whether it's just Me Too and then leaving it, or whether it's going into detail, or whether it's being incredibly creative and poetic and visceral and candid and revelatory about their own experiences. And I'm hesitant to say anything about it, and I'm hesitant not to say anything about it, because I was involved. I wasn't involved in an argument a few years ago between two comedian friends of mine, one of them white, one of them non-white. If you're friends with us, you know who these people were. And I didn't say anything because the white comedian's argument that racism wasn't a thing or didn't exist seemed to me so preposterous, and I didn't want to insult or embarrass my non-white friend by sticking my oar in when I thought he was doing a completely capable job of tearing apart this other guy's argument. I didn't say anything. I felt like, I don't want to patronise my non-white friend by, I'll help, I'll come to your rescue, and so I didn't say anything. I sort of sat there and watched this thing happen as someone very masterfully tore a strip off someone else, and I understand that these guys are both now friends again, and it's all resolved. Afterwards, it was communicated to me that my non-white friend had felt a bit fucking aggrieved that other people hadn't chimed in and stood up for him. And I don't want to make that mistake again. So, for all that I worry about accusations of being a white knight, or which is some awful MRA terminology, or accusations of wanting to virtue signal, which is another fucking bullshit piece of terminology, as much as I'm concerned about people accusing me of wanting to somehow benefit myself, or worse, I'm also concerned about being told, look, this isn't a time for you to speak. I get that as well. But at the same time, I think I have a burgeoning awareness that if you don't at some point say, hey everyone, there's a huge problem with sexual harassment right now, then the danger is, which clearly there is, if I as a man don't say anything, then people who are offenders and abusers I'm not contributing to any kind of wave against them, even if it's just because I consider it, well, obviously sexual harassment is wrong. Obviously there's a fuckload of misogyny in the world. Obviously I am a feminist. I think any right-thinking person is a feminist. Obviously there are, so much of this stuff seems really obvious to me. I don't want to get involved in an argument that sucks my time away. I don't know how much online arguments change things, but I don't want to simply take for granted my non-involvement in the fucking dialogue anymore, because it's so upsetting hearing at first hand over and over again just how much this goes on, and having this kind of white male experience of sort of going, oh shit, I mean, I'd just been operating on the basis that the world was tough for everyone and you just got to look after yourself, and then looking around and going, oh fuck me, even I, who was pretty aware of how privileged I was, still wasn't aware of how privileged I was. And so it's painful, and I think I got the first whispers of maybe there's a hashtag for men to go, I believe you, which I approve of as a thing. But again, to me, that seems to take the argument away and go, well, let's make it all about me. I was privy to a big argument on someone's Facebook thread, which I didn't actually engage with again. And I feel like a dick for not engaging with it, but for ranting elsewhere. Where some men literally got onto a thread that a woman had put on her Facebook where other women were expressing solidarity with one another, and two men turned up and very quickly went through a cycle of, yeah, but what are we supposed to do about it? Hey, what do you mean I'm supposed to work it out myself? Hey, why are you being such a dick to me? God, you're all bitches. It was honestly as simple as that, and I just felt so sick and ashamed of what twats men can be, and how. And once or twice, I came across endless rivers of patience exhibited by women on this thread, and one or two men who were just calmly, quietly saying, I don't think this is the place to talk about that, mate. And just trying to help in a way that didn't fucking go, don't worry, chicks, I've got this, in that kind of crashing, boorish way that all men can do without realising we're doing it. When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like a threat. I've minced that quote, but it feels like oppression. And that's the problem. I think to open our eyes as men and go, Jesus Christ, we're all part of this problem to some extent, whether it's simply because we've got a mate who's a bit of a lad and we don't pick him up as often as we should on some of the things he says. We're all involved. We're all complicit. And I just want to fucking say that. I just want to say that out loud, because to me that's obvious. But if you don't say it, if you don't just put up a hand and go, oh, by the way, we have to fucking take responsibility for this, even if other people or other men or whoever want to go, oh Christ, here we go again. I mean, Jesus, if you're not enjoying this bit, turn it off. But I am making myself vulnerable by saying this, and this is in a minuscule way, but this is more to do with my personal psychology. I have always dressed in order to not present a target for ridicule. Do you know what I mean? Due to aspects of my schooling, which I occasionally allude to in the podcast and don't go into detail on, I basically am terrified of people picking on me. I'm terrified of being a target. I'm terrified of being a target for physical abuse or ridicule or psychological abuse, all of those things. And so I keep my head down, and I would just like to stop keeping my head down. So there you go. Yeah, I'm leaving a big pregnant pause there as if I'm basically just, yeah, there we go. So bring up the stirring music now. It's pathetic, isn't it? It's just, of course I haven't been through anything like this horrific abuse that all of these women are talking about in their droves, and with such creativity and patience and resignment and exhaustion. So if you're a man, can you just do me a favour and next time you get involved in a woman's Facebook thread about something they're sharing, can you just say something brief and supportive and then shut up? And any problems you've got with the idea of, hey, but there's sexual violence against men as well. Great, start your own thread about that and talk about that. Don't just bring it up when you're trying to derail a conversation that is actually about sexual violence towards women, because that is also part of the problem. All right, lecture over. That'll do me. I've got other stuff to do. Yeah, there we go. Bye, everyone.